Distribution centers trust PickerPal for passive fall protection that simply works. Over 60,000 of their patent-pending self-closing arms are in distribution facilities nationwide, securing pick module edges automatically as product is removed from pallets. No more missed chains or open gates. We don't like that. Learn more at pickerpalproducts.com and protect your team the smarter way. That's pickerpalproducts.com. Protect your team today.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. And on today's episode, I am going to be joined by Jason Minghini, who is the Senior Vice President of Supply Chain Solutions at Kenco. And we are going to talk a little bit about what his title actually means. What does that mean? We'll dive into that a little bit for people. And we're also going to talk a little bit about how Kenco is approaching the tariff situation, how their clients are approaching the tariff situation. And we're also going to talk a little bit about maybe some of the impacts that might have on some of the labor in the operations world, warehousing world. And we'll also talk about recent projects that they've done with AutoStore and GreyOrange and how you should approach automation and robotics based on Jason's advice. So definitely happy to get Jason on the podcast here and talk to him today. So Jason, welcome in. How are you today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Definitely happy to get you on. Happy to talk to you here and, get a little advice from you as well for people out there who are maybe considering doing some of the things you've already done. But for people that aren't familiar, why don't you give us kind of a brief overview of Kenco first?
For sure. So Kenco is a third-party logistics provider. I think up until 2022, we were the largest woman-owned 3PL in North America. In 2022, we were acquired by PPC, which is Pritzker Private Capital. And that transition occurred in 2022. We've got about 135 distribution centers across North America, really covering all verticals from CPG to life sciences to food and beverage. We typically stay out of things like automotive and electronics. That's just not our fortes, but every other vertical we're kind of in. We do distribution, we do material handling, we do transportation. We have different groups within Kenco that does that. But our primary focus across North America, which includes both Canada and Mexico, is really distribution and fulfillment, right? We've got major distribution centers really across the country. We've got e-com fulfillment centers, which I guess we'll talk about here in a few minutes when we talk about AutoStore relative to goods to person. And so we do last mile delivery, white glove delivery. For Stryker Medical, we do in-hospital bed delivery, which is kind of unique. We'll actually take the beds from the DC and take the beds into the hospital, pull the old beds out, put the new ones in. And so that's kind of a white glove service.
Interesting.
Yeah. So do the full gamut across the supply chain.
Definitely. So you got some experience to talk about some of these topics that we're going to talk about here today for sure. Now tell us, I'm curious your role. You're Senior Vice President of Supply Chain Solutions, right? So tell us a little bit about what does that mean? What are supply chain solutions?
Yeah. So the easiest way to say it is it's anything geeky. Anything engineering is usually kind of reports through me. So from new solutions, so when a customer sends us an RFP to kind of build a new solution, kind of go through the RFP process, I've got responsibility for that team. Data science, business analytics, innovation, robotics and automation, traditional industrial engineering, and program management, and then also our operating system, which is based on the Toyota production system. So all those groups kind of report through me, and then realistically, what we're there to do is just to provide solutions for not only our internal customers, but our external customers as well. So all the geeky stuff you would typically think about from an engineering perspective.
Nice, nice. So all the stuff we nerd out about,
That's
like
right.
I got a ProMat or a Monex or something
That's
like
right.
that. Definitely. Cool, cool. I like that. That sounds like a fun job. How did you kind of get into that? What's like
No,
your
it's
background?
kind of a weird situation. I am not a industrial engineer by degree. Actually, my degree is
Okay.
nuclear engineering. So
Interesting.
yeah,
Okay.
so I went to Georgia Tech, graduated in '94. And ironically, my uncle worked at Los Alamos out in New Mexico on
Mm,
weapons prior to, I guess, the Cold War. And so he got me interested in that. I went to Georgia Tech,
okay.
came in '90 when the wall fell. And so after that, they didn't need a whole lot of weapons designers anymore. And so I still stuck with it. I graduated in '94,
Mm,
met my wife at Georgia Tech. She is a civil engineer. She's retired now. So kind of followed her up to Chattanooga, which is really where Kenco's headquartered. Got into automotive. That's where I cut my teeth really in supply chain was automotive, working for companies that work with Toyota, not for Toyota. We were tier one, spent some time in Japan at some Toyota facilities, and then came over to Kenco, I think in like 2007 when the craziness was starting to happen in the automotive industry. So been on this side of the fence since about 2007. Yeah.
interesting. Interesting. Okay. All right. Well, if anything, right, worth it to meet your wife, right?
That's right. Exactly. Hey, my daughter,
There
she's
you
actually
go.
just graduated from Georgia Tech last
Wow. Okay.
week.
Love
Yeah.
it.
So, and my son, he graduated from Lafayette up in PA. You probably know the school.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in
Sure.
Easton. But he's getting his master's in data science from Georgia Tech. So, whole family's going to have a
Oh
Georgia
wow.
Tech degree. Yeah.
Nice, nice,
Yeah.
nice. Well, congratulations
Yeah. Thank
all
you.
around to
Yeah.
the family there, definitely. So obviously, a lot, getting into the supply chain world, like you said, a little bit in 2007 there, and obviously a lot of evolution and
Yeah.
change in the industry in the last, I guess, is what 10 years here almost,
Yeah.
and or 20
Yeah.
years almost. So right now, certainly the big disruption, right, that we're seeing this year, right, is around this tariff situations and what's going to happen, what is happening, quick changes, right, all these different things. So tell us a little bit about how is Kenco approaching the situation, and I guess also how are your clients approaching the situation? How are
Yeah.
you working together to try and navigate some of this?
Yeah, I think hold your breath on the tariffs, right? So whatever
Mm,
happens today may be vastly different than I think next week. And I think whether we're talking about our vendors from an automation perspective, which a lot of that stuff's made in China, or our customers' product, which again a lot of that stuff's probably made over in China as well. It's really the unknown and the uncertainty that I think that we're all trying to deal with, right? Because do we
mm,
think it's going to be worked out long term? Yes, but what will it be when it gets worked out? How long will that take? Who knows, right? And again, hold your breath to what it may be next week. So I think from a customer perspective, we started to see a little bit of change right before the election last year. I think
mm,
there was some word on the street or painting on the wall, if you will, that hey, if Trump gets elected, he's probably going to institute a lot of big tariffs, especially on China. So we started to see a ton of our customers pre-buying inventory, even before the election last year and bringing it in. So they were trying to get in front of the tariffs as much as
mm.
possible. That helped us a lot, quite honestly, because obviously our main forte is warehouses. And so we needed more space. They needed more space. So we started to go out and find some overflow space for our customers, build
Okay.
that up. I think we're still carrying some of that inventory now, right? But I think maybe you guys heard in the news last week or even earlier this week that a lot of the ships are coming to the ports that are empty or half
Right.
empty, right? Because some of those the ships have just not coming to the states right now. So I think that's going to change, especially with what it was announced in the last couple of days. But our customers are just, I think, they're hesitant right now. I would say that, right? Hey, what is it going
Mm,
to be? We did pre-buy. The other thing that we're seeing, which I think probably is the main point of the tariffs, is some change in strategy in terms of manufacturing, right? Are we going to start bringing that stuff back to the states? We're going to nearshore it or reshore it. We're starting to see some of that activity to say, Heinz, I think maybe yesterday, Kraft Heinz said they're going to invest $2 billion in the states and bringing the manufacturing up to speed. I think we're going to see a lot of our customers do that. Some have already done it, right? Some of them
mm.
already got in front of the tariffs. So that's what our customers are doing. Our vendors, specifically like GreyOrange and AutoStore. AutoStore comes from obviously Europe. GreyOrange predominantly
Yeah.
gets manufactured in China. We're starting to ask them to put tariff protections in our agreements. Number one, and number
Mm,
two,
okay.
can we pre-buy inventory, or can we send that inventory through a third party, potentially, i.e., India, and
Mm,
potentially get around some of the tariffs? Right. So GreyOrange ships from China to India, and then India to the States. That satisfies or gets around some of the tariffs, or the tariff structure a little bit lower. Europe is a little bit different, obviously, than Asia. So we're still just trying to work with the vendors to try to get around some of that. But we don't know. I mean, ROI calculations from a robotics perspective obviously can be very much manipulated by tariffs. I mean, if we have to bring a pot in from China and it's 145% tariff, that's going to blow the ROI up. So we either have to find a domestic source or work with the vendor to kind of work around those tariffs. Or GreyOrange, I know, is potentially talking about shifting maybe some of their production from China to India to long term, right? So not only are we seeing our customers shift production, we're also starting to see some of the automation vendors shift some of their production as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, because we talk about shifting that here, and oftentimes we're focused on like the end consumer, right, and the product that they're going to get, and what does that price look like if there's tariff tacked onto that, and those things. But there's not a ton of discussion about, at least I haven't seen a ton of discussion about the equipment and things that support the movement of that material. And that's a great point that you bring up about we're planning to implement these automation or robotic projects in the future, and like this is like our roadmap. But now all of a sudden, do these tariffs totally change what the ROI looks like, and do we have to change course on that? So I'm curious there from an automation perspective, right? Because one of the I guess underlying principles or underlying things that the tariffs are supposed to be doing or attempting to do is bring some of that manufacturing back stateside, right? Which then would lead to additional jobs is what the idea is, right? But for a while, especially in the warehousing side, I think manufacturing as well. I mean, we've been talking about a labor shortage for quite some time, right? And I think maybe it's gotten a little better, right? But there's still the challenge, I think, in the U.S. Like, do people want to work in these type of roles, right? So how do you see that kind of, or how are you planning for that a little bit to, if there are increased amount of jobs in the warehouse, or how are you planning to get the labor for that? Or is this going to push more towards automation to be able to fill some of those new gaps that are created?
Yeah, I think initially it's going to be automation. If you look back to prior to COVID, I think a lot of companies, specifically 3PLs, I mean, manufacturing's always been in front of the curve doing automation and that kind of stuff. But prior to COVID, 3PLs were starting to dabble into automation, innovation labs, maybe doing some POCs, proof of concepts in the warehouse, but they really weren't bought into it 100%. And then COVID happened, and COVID really changed the game to a large extent. And the reason why it did is because you have these, you start to hear economists say, the old generation workforce, they started to retire because they said, hey, we don't need to do this anymore. We don't need to put our lives in jeopardy. We're near retirement. So they had what we call the Great Resignation. And then the 18 to 24-year-olds started to not go to work as well. They did things like trying to be TikTok famous in their parents' house and things like that. And so they just didn't go to work like maybe I did or you did or some other people did. And so we've got really a shrinking workforce, both at the top end, which they're never coming back, and then we have the lowest participation rate in history of between 18 and 24-year-olds. The other thing that we have that you're starting to hear people talk about, and this is just not a U.S. problem, this is a world problem. We are not replicating as fast as we need to be to maintain the population, right? So I think the last number I saw was, I think it's 1.2 births per person on average in the States, right? So we don't have an expanding workforce, we have a shrinking workforce. And so if that's it today, think 18 years from now when that group should be hitting the workforce, well, there's going to be a lot less workers in the future than there are today, right? So we have a workforce shortage today, we're going to have a workforce shortage in the future. In fact, I know we have economists come talk to us on the MHI board, and he always brings up, if everybody in the U.S. had a job that wanted a job, we would still be 4 million workers short, right, in the U.S.
Wow.
Yeah, which is a huge number, which then kind of bleeds into the whole immigration discussion is, is that the reason why, we need to bring immigrants in to kind of fill that workforce? That's a completely different subject. But to answer your question, yes, robotics, right? So where are we going to get the workers if we're not, replicating enough, if we're not going to allow immigration to come in? Well, we got to do it with automation and robotics. And so a lot of companies are starting to do that. And so even so much that the ROI discussion has changed a little bit. Before COVID and before this huge worker shortage, it was always, how much is the automation going to cost? How much labor is it going to save me? Do the math. And if it's lower a certain hurdle rate, we're going to do it. Now it's not only about how much labor is it going to save me, but what if I can't get the labor to begin with?
Right.
And so what does that mean from an SLA perspective and getting my customer the product when they need it? Well, if I can't do that, then I'm going to get hit with penalties. I may lose the business. So now we're starting to see not only just cost reductions, but also, well, what if I can't get the labor brought into the ROI discussion? So that's what we're doing. A lot of other 3PLs are doing that. And then, so, to specifically answer your question, it's robotics and automation. And that's the reason why we're on this path, major path to automate, right? Not only because we see it as necessary, but our customers are also asking us to do it as well.
Interesting. Yeah. And I think it's really interesting to see it. And that's like a pretty incredible number, right? If everybody had a job that wanted a job, we'd still be 4 million short, right? And if we look at that birth rate that you mentioned too, then I think that's only gonna increase, right? And unless all of a sudden people just start having babies like crazy, right?
Well, it's funny. You heard some. I think in even a rumor, or it wasn't a rumor. It was on the news, I guess, last week, where I guess the current administration was saying, "Hey, if you have a baby, we'll give you a $4,000 benefit check."
I saw that was floated.
Yeah, because we're just not. We're going to collapse. The population is starting. I mean, Japan is far worse off. I mean, Japan's birth rate is much lower than the U.S. Right, and even Europe is lower too. So something's got to give, right? Either we start having more babies, which doesn't help us today, right? That may help us, 18, 20 years from now. But what's going to get us through the hump today, both from a wage perspective, because wages are going up, but also from a labor shortage is automation for sure.
We'll be back after a quick break.
Are you asking the question, where's my stuff, too often? Whether it's in your own warehouses, from your suppliers, or in your customer network, if you're not sure where your stuff is, then Surge Air has the solution for you. With Surge Air's 99.9% accuracy, you're getting more than just supply chain visibility. You're getting the ability to orchestrate your supply chain and guide decisions in real time. Reduce the chaos in your supply chain and find operational truth with Surge Air. Find your visibility and learn more at surgeair.com. That's surgeair.com.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm curious there. This is a question I've been asking people lately is, if we look at the trajectory there, like we just talked about, right, when we're going to have more robotics, more automation in place. And, right now we would say that an entry-level position in the warehouse would be like a material handler, basically, right? But if we look, 10, 15 years from now, what do you think an entry-level position in the warehouse would be?
That's a very interesting question. And, it's something that we're starting to I guess, ponder as well. I think 15 to 20 years from now, we're going to be more close to the dark warehouse concept than we ever have been. And, that concept is you cut the lights off at night, you come back in, and your orders are ready to go, right, for the next day with very little to no human interaction. I think 15 to 20 years from now, the people that are going to be working in a warehouse are going to be the coordinators of the automation, right? They're going to be the people who can track the automation, maybe fix the automation if it has a little bit of hiccups or issues, but just maybe orchestrates the entire system. And there's going to be, 5 to 6 of those in the warehouse, and that's what it's going to be, which is different than the day, right? Part of the issue we have today that I think the world's starting to figure out, especially some of the vendors that we're working with, is, well, if we put an AutoStore in, we put a Locus system in, we put a vertical lift module in, and we have all these, I guess you would call them disparate automation systems. Well, what controls everything, right? What makes sure the orders drop? The appropriate amount of orders go to AutoStore, the right orders go to Locus, the right orders go to the vertical lift module. Because if we have humans on the front end of that orchestrating stuff, then we're going to have a problem there as well, right? Because it's just so complex and so dynamic that people aren't being trained to do that or being educated to do that. So now you're talking about, orchestration software. So it's going to be people that basically just watch the system and manage the system and then potentially interact with the system, when things maybe have hiccups or go wrong. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. I think it'll be interesting to see what that is, right? Because I think that's one of the challenges too, is that people don't necessarily want to be a material handler anymore, right? They don't want to move boxes around manually, and I think that's why we see a lot of push towards some of this stuff. So so now you guys are obviously embracing automation and
Yes.
robotics. You recently did an AutoStore and a GreyOrange project in some of your facilities. So tell us a little bit about that, and maybe kind of like what was the problem set, and why did that end up being the solution?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So the first AutoStore that we did was here in Chattanooga. It was pre-COVID. We designed it and started to implement it pre-COVID, but it really helped us get through COVID, right? Once we installed it because of the labor shortage and things like that. And it's a dedicated AutoStore, what I'll call dedicated, single customer. It's mostly parcel, which is what a lot of AutoStores are. Each picks, that kind of thing. There's some case picks in there, but it's usually each picks. The second system we put in was in our e-com facility in Jeffersonville, Indiana, right outside Louisville. And it was direct to consumer. It's, as we're being told, the only AutoStore in the world that has multiple different customers in the same system. And so what I mean by that is, instead of maybe just one client that has different product, this is truly 7 different customers in the same system. And we're commingling inventory in the same bin, right, to increase batch factors and pick rates and that kind of stuff. But it's strictly for direct to consumer. So, we get the order in a day, we promise to ship it today. If we get it in before noon, next day, if we get it in afternoon. And so it's all direct to consumer, small parcel business. Both of those were used to address worker shortage, wage rate inflation, but also a space consolidation, right? Back in pre-2020, right around COVID, real estate prices were starting to go through the roof as well, along with wages. And so we're saying, hey, how can we shrink our footprint? And AutoStore, for instance, is very good about density, right? So going in and up versus spreading out horizontally, just to kind of give you an indication. Before AutoStore in Jeffersonville, we had about 17,000 pick locations and about 15,000 square feet. Now in that same square footage, we've got over 80,000 pick faces, right? Because the bin storage. And the same thing in our AutoStore in Chattanooga. GreyOrange is case picking. So vastly different than each picking with AutoStore. So we wanted to go out and find a strategic partner that we could put in to do case picking, and GreyOrange was kind of that vendor that we selected. What we're trying to do from a strategy perspective is not try to be all things to all people. What we're trying to say is, can we go out and find 4 or 5 key partners that we really form strategic partnerships with that basically covers 90% of the profile spectrum. And so if it doesn't fit an AutoStore because it's too big, too heavy, well, then there's GreyOrange from a case picking perspective, or maybe a rack to person solution that GreyOrange has as well. If it's not high volume enough, then maybe there's a locus vector solution that we can put in place. And maybe if it doesn't fit an AutoStore, maybe there's a VLM. But we're trying to figure out if there's those 4 or 5 key pieces of technology that if our customer's profile shifts, then it may not fit an AutoStore anymore, but maybe it fits another piece of technology. In the past, where we've gotten into trouble, and a lot of people have gotten into trouble with automation, is you bring it in to fit a particular profile. That profile changes, and now you're stuck with a piece of technology that is not flexible enough to adapt to the new profile, because that's where we had a singular piece of technology. Today, the market is starting to convert to multiple pieces of technology to where it's more flexible, more dynamic to the customer profile changes. We learned that through COVID, right? COVID created the big profile shift. And so we all had to be able to be flexible and nimble to that. So AutoStore, GreyOrange, Vector Locus, we've used Auto as well in some projects, but a lot of that, again, is to increase density, increase throughput, mitigate wage shortages, and then wage inflation as well.
Interesting. Yeah. And it's a really great point that you pointed out there. It's like, how do we automate? How do we bring robotics in, but still be able to have variability? Because, if you're 3PL, obviously there's going to be some changes, right? I mean, you're not really necessarily in control of those changes. You're not, going to them with product development ideas and things like that. They're just like, hey, we're going to sell this now, right?
That's right.
We've been selling socks, but you know what? We're going to sell big puffy jackets now too, right? Something like that, right? And now it's like, well, that takes up a lot more space. How are we going to handle this? So, and I think that's been one of the challenges for a lot of people, especially 3PLs. It's like, well, how do we come up with that solution that's not so rigid and just like, okay, well, we have it with this client now. All of a sudden, 3 years later, well, we got to shift things around, and is this even a relevant solution for us anymore? So I'm curious, like, what would your advice be for, somebody that's looking at automation solutions that are going to be somewhat future proof in a sense? Like, what would your advice be on how to approach that and not necessarily get maybe stuck or frozen because they're a little scared of that potential risk?
So you're starting to see a lot of people get away from what I would say is monuments. What I mean by monument is technology that's bolted to the floor, because that's
Okay.
when you start to see things bolted to a floor, it becomes very fixed. So conveyance, you're starting to see a lot of your conveyance go away, and you're starting to see a lot of robots do sorting right on the outbound side, like
Yeah.
Tompkins T-sort and post and all that good stuff. So go into the design process to say, how can I be as flexible as I possibly can? And then also do sensitivity analysis to say, this is my profile today. And let's say it's 3 units per order. What happens if it goes to 12 units per order? How flexible is the current technology that we're looking at? And then also have a secondary plan to say, if it does go to 12, this is what I'm going to do. So not only look at multiple pieces, but also run sensitivity analysis to make sure that your technology can absorb a certain profile shift. Where a lot of companies learn that the hard way is peak and non-peak, right? Usually for holiday season, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and then maybe some other, one-off sales, that profile changes. And it could be, 2 or 3 times different.
Yeah.
If your system's not capable to do that, then you're going to get stuck and you're going to miss your SLAs with your customers. So a lot of people who do a lot of e-com fulfillment kind of learn that the hard way. And then the next project they go, okay, well, we're not going to make that mistake again. Let's make sure it's flexible enough to handle a certain profile swing. And then, oh, by the way, if it goes outside of that, what's going to be our backup plan? For sure. So sensitivity analysis is a big piece of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting there. And I think it is interesting too, as there's so much ebb and flow sometimes, like in the demand and the needs, and from season to season or quarter to quarter. So very interesting there. And I'm curious too, because we touched on the labor challenge for sure, right? But as you're bringing in these automation and robotic solutions, how are you working with the employees to get them to understand that? Because I think sometimes maybe there's like some fear, right? They're like, oh, whoa, this robot just showed up on my job. It's coming for me, right? Or something, right? So how do you as Kenco navigate that, and how do you either transition them to a different role or get them ready for like these implementations to go live?
Yeah. So the first thing we do is we have to do a lot of change management on the front end. We basically say, hey, nobody's losing their job. We're going to basically take you and put you into a much more value creating position, right? I mean, in a warehouse, 70% of a picker's time, whether that be on a forklift or pushing a cart around, is travel distance. So a lot of automation, all they're trying to do is get rid of travel distance, right? If you can remove 70% of a person's travel distance, then that creates a lot more time for that person to do something value creating. So we're basically saying, hey, Locust, if you look at a manual push cart, that's a lot of walking. Well, guess what? When we convert it to Locust, well, Locust gets rid of quite a bit of that walk distance, right? So you're in zone picking, and the robot just brings the cart to you. You pick it, and the robot goes to the next location. AutoStore takes it even up a higher. You're doing no walking at all. You're at a pick board, and the bin gets presented to you. You pick it, put it into another bin, and so it's just an evolution of removing walk distance. The other thing that we're seeing too with the younger workforce is, well, they're used to playing PlayStation 5s and Xboxes and all the good stuff. So when they come in and see the technology, they're a lot more inclined to interact with it, right? Because they're kind of used to it. The older age group, we work with them too. The great thing is a lot of the technology as well, even if their native language is not English, it will communicate with them in their native language, whether it be Spanish or Russian or Vietnamese or whatever the case may be. They will see on the screen and hear in their ear their native language, and it makes the training process a lot quicker. And then it's a lot more dynamic from pictures and things like that. So it's very easy. I mean, we always joke because we'll go and our COO and CEO will take them to these technology kickoffs, and we say, hey, you get up there and pick. And we get these big eyes, right? And they're like, well, yeah, we'll get up there and pick. And quite honestly, within 15 minutes, they're picking it right, which is incredible, right? With very little to no training, because all you really got to do is follow the directions on the screen. In combination with like pick the light bars, you pick it, you turn around, the light's flashing, you put it in, you hit the button. So it's almost numbing to a certain extent. So that's the reason why not only do we do change management up front, but we also do job rotation, right? Because even though it's a lot less work in essence, it can get numbing just to do the repetitive thing over and over again. Look at the screen, pick it, push the button, do the same thing over. So job rotation is important as well.
Interesting. Yeah. And great point there too, because that training aspect and cutting that time down is such a big win, right? Because, traditionally way back when, right? I mean, take you a week or so to get somebody like up to speed, maybe 2 weeks, depending on what your operation looks like and what systems you got in place. But, bringing somebody in the same day and, getting them up to speed, I think it allows so much more flexibility to, on whether you're going to rely on a flexible workforce or temps or something like that, getting them to do something more meaningful than just, let's bring in an extra hand to move some boxes around, because it's not worth it to spend the time to get them involved in the system and all these things. Like,
that's right.
That quick, training uptime, I think is huge for sure. So really interesting to talk to you here, Jason, and, really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing some insights, from the floor, I guess directly on some projects you worked on here and what you guys are looking at Kenco and kind of the future of what the warehouse might look like. So very interesting to speak with you and really appreciate the time. If people want to learn more about Kenco or maybe get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, probably go through the website, kencogroup.com. You can get in touch with us there, and my email address is there as well. So that'd be the easiest way to do it.
All right, great. And we'll definitely put that at thenewwarehouse.com as well as in the show notes here. So Jason, thank you once again for your time on the show today.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Enjoyed this episode? Make sure you are subscribed to the podcast, and for more content from the New Warehouse, find us on LinkedIn and YouTube. Links to subscribe can be found in the show notes, and for everything The New Warehouse, head to thenewwarehouse.com.